You want to grow as much muscle as possible, so the approach you need to take in the gym is simple and straightforward. Drive your logbook numbers up over time. I don't care if you're doing that with 5 reps, 10 reps, 15 reps, 20 reps. I don't care if your favorite piece of equipment is a barbell, dumbbell, cable, or even a great machine. Focus on a few key movements, drive those numbers up over time, recover, eat accordingly, and repeat over time. That equals you getting huge. Now, this isn't new information, and I've said it 1,000 times. But one thing that often gets overlooked that you might be skipping over right now is dialing in your technique so that you're getting the most out of each and every rep in the gym. And what I mean by that is this. You can focus on progression using a very heavy load for 6 reps, using maybe a 1 or 2 second negative, no pause, and a very explosive positive. And now if you standardize that technique, meaning you lock it in as the default every single time you train, regardless of how much weight is on the bar, and you perform either more reps or more weight over time with that same technique, you'll grow. Now, if you don't want to have to handle as much weight, or let's say that you're just super strong, or you have joint issues, or you just want to minimize the wear and tear, you might want to take a 2 or 3 second negative. Maybe add in a pause in the stretch position, maybe hold the rep at peak contraction. Now what that'll do is it'll allow you to train in a similar rep range, but with a fraction of the weight. And arguably the muscle stimulation is just as high, if not higher. But here's the thing. You need to stay with whatever technique you use as your standard, and from there, progress over time. But many guys never actually take that time to dial in the technique. And I'll tell you what, if you have a body part that just doesn't respond as well as others, no matter what you do, take a look at your technique. Is the tempo, range of motion, or the execution consistent across the board? When you add weight or when you add reps, does it change? I'm gonna bet that it does. It's one of the most common issues I see in the gym. Most guys understand the importance of progressive overload, but they get carried away with adding reps or weight over time. They might have started out with great technique, but then over the weeks and months of adding weight, tempo started to increase on the negatives, range of motion might have got cut short, and execution might shift to allowing more assisted muscles to come into play. You successfully added more weight to the bar, but the tension on the target muscle is no greater, and in many cases might actually be less. So with that being said, one of the most effective things you can do in your training is periodically go back, look where you're not growing, and on those body parts or movements, re-standardize your technique. Then focus on progression from there. Here's a few things that I really like to dial in for body parts that tend to lag, or the ones that you just don't have great mind-muscle connection on. The first are slower tempos. As a general rule of thumb, I like everyone to lower the weight twice as slow as the amount of time it takes you to lift it. And that's a very solid baseline. And in simple terms, it's really a 1 second positive, 2 second negative. And this alone can be standardized technique for the majority of your training. It's generally how I've always done most of my presses. It's generally the technique I've always used for my arm training, and most of the body parts that respond generally easy for me. But if you have a lagging muscle group, I do generally like a slower approach, going from maybe a 2 second negative to upwards of 3 seconds, but also adding in pauses. Generally, I like 1 pause in the stretch position and 1 in the contracted. For myself this year, I started to really take this to heart with my back training specifically. Back has always been a body part that's responded slower than, let's say, my chest, my presses, or even my arm training. And this last year, I really focused on bringing it up. While I did make some good improvements through other changes in my training, what I had found is that I had ended up getting extremely strong on most of these back movements, to the point where I was regularly racking lat pull downs. I was maxing out a lot of machine rows, and in order for me to keep progressing, I had to use serious weights on almost everything, which now posed a new challenge, and that's stabilizing my body weight against a ton of weight on back training. That need to stabilize made focusing on the target muscles a lot more difficult. The one way around that for me was simply slowing down the tempo dramatically. Now with a 2 to 3 second negative, a 1 second pause, and a 1 second contraction, I'm using maybe 60% of the weights that I'd used previously for back training. Now again, this is only on back training at the moment for me, but now I am applying that same intensity to each set and each rep. I'm focusing on progressive overload the same way as I was before, but it's not requiring me to load as heavily to accomplish that same result. Now, I'm not saying to just switch this tempo and use it as a magic bullet and that it'll have you growing better than what you're already doing. In fact, if your body's responding well to what you're doing, don't change it. But if you have a muscle that's lagging, this could literally be the exact thing that you need, especially if you find yourself very strong but don't have the size to back it up. The next thing you can do now is you can dial in the range of motion for the target muscle you're training. Now, obviously, increasing the range of motion if you're performing partial reps or just not taking the target muscle through its full range of motion is a no-brainer. If your pecs aren't growing because you're a notorious half bencher at the gym, you'll likely benefit from letting the bar touch your pecs, getting a greater range of motion on the target muscle. I don't think anything needs to be said about this other than if you've been adding weight to a movement over time, but your range of motion has now gotten shorter to accommodate that extra load, strip some weight off the bar, perform those reps correctly, full range of motion, reset that technique as your standard, and then progress from there. But you can actually be making the opposite mistake here today. And I see a ton of guys get this wrong, especially since the idea of stretch-mediated hypertrophy became such a huge fad. A lot of guys now are just blindly increasing the range of motion on a movement, but actually getting less out of the target muscle. Yes, you heard that right. Let me explain. There's a range of motion for a movement, and then there's a range of motion for a muscle. Think about that for a second. A standard deadlift is generally done at the height of a 45-pound plate. That range of motion for that lift is considered full ROM. Your goal is to touch the floor between reps. And with that range of motion, it not only works the entire body, but generally more specifically the back, hamstrings, and glutes. But what it doesn't do very effectively is train any one of those three muscles through the muscle's full range of motion. If you want more hamstrings, a stiff leg deadlift, even to the floor, isn't full range of motion for the hamstrings. It's full range of motion for the movement, but to get the hamstrings to work, you actually want to perform them on a deficit. If your goal is targeting the hamstrings, that's full range of motion. But what if you're doing your deadlifts for more back? There's a reason why rack pulls exist. The majority of the range of motion for targeting the back in a hip hinge is where the bar is about mid-shin or up. From there, back is doing the majority of the work. So if you're simply doing deficit RDLs, you're still training your back, don't get me wrong. But if your main goal is massive erectors, you can actually benefit from dialing in that technique with either the plate on the floor or even a mid-shin rack pull. Same thing with lateral raises. I can raise those dumbbells out to the side and get a full range of motion from my side delts. But what's to stop me from raising them all the way up in the air overhead? I have the ability to keep going, and that's increased range of motion. But as we know, that's all traps. And I'm not doing lateral raises for traps. So you want to start thinking about range of motion for muscles and not just range of motion for movements. Dial in the range of motion effective for the muscle that you're trying to train, which should be full range of motion for the muscle, not just the movement. Standardize that technique and then progress from there. Apply this to your training if you want to get massive. And if you need the training programs that I recommend to build more muscle, or you want to work with me directly to reach your goals, check out both links down below. And as always, if you want to see more of the best original bodybuilding content just like this, make sure to hit subscribe.